Does the Prime Minister think that if he held a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty, he would win it?
Mr. Speaker, no country in Europe apart from Ireland is holding a referendum on the constitutional treaty.
Order. We won't start with shouting the Prime Minister down or the Leader of the Opposition. Prime Minister.
Speaker, if this was a constitutional treaty, we would hold a referendum. If there was a vote on a euro, we'd hold a referendum. But the constitutional concept was abandoned, and that's why the 9 countries who proposed a referendum, including Ireland, are not having a referendum. And the question that the opposition has got to answer is this. If after ratification they have a referendum, they're essentially renegotiating our membership of the European Union, and that would put thousands of jobs in this country at risk.
Everyone watching will see the Prime Minister will not answer the question. The truth is, all of us in this House promised a referendum. We have the courage of our convictions and are sticking to that promise. He has lost his courage, and that lot have lost their convictions. So let me ask him again. If he held a referendum, does he think he'd win it?
Speaker, the last time a referendum was held on Europe, it was won with a massive majority. And let me also say to him that the proposals that he puts forward puts our membership of the European Union at risk. And when will he not wake up to the fact that 3.5 million jobs are dependent on our membership of the European Union, that 700,000 companies are trading with Europe, that 60% of our trade is with Europe, and all that is put at risk by Conservative intransigence on Europe?
And answer came there none. He says that the constitutional concept has been abandoned, and yet this treaty includes an EU foreign minister, an EU president, an EU diplomatic service. I don't think Tony Blair is running for president of some feeble organisation. He's running to be president of the United States of Europe. This treaty gets rid of dozens of vetoes, and it gives the European Union for the first time the ability to get rid of further treaties without another treaty. If it looks like a constitution, it sounds like the constitution, that's because it is the constitution. Tony Blair found the courage to back a referendum. Why won't he?
Speaker, the Conservative Party is wrong. This is not the United States of Europe. The Conservative Party is wrong. Foreign policy is decided at an intergovernmental level. And as far as what he says about this institutional arrangement is concerned, what the former Chancellor says is what we have is now far less important than Maastricht. And they didn't have a referendum on Maastricht.
That's a reference to Ken Clarke.
If he wants to trade quotes, why doesn't he try this one from the honourable member for Birmingham Edgbaston, who was actually Labour's appointment to the organisation to draw up the Constitution?
That's Labour MP Gisela Stewart.
A referendum was promised. It should be delivered. If Labour can't trust the people, why should the people trust Labour? Doesn't the Prime Minister understand that this is one of the reasons why our political system is so badly broken? All 3 parties in this House made a promise to our constituents for a vote on the EU Constitution. When we turn round and say you can't have it anymore, it's no wonder people feel cheated, people feel cynical, because promises made are promises being broken. Why can't the Prime Minister see the damage that he's doing?
Mr. Speaker, I've explained to the House, if this was a constitutional treaty, we'd be having a referendum. The constitutional concept was abandoned. And if he wishes to persist in talking about the United States of Europe and a constitutional treaty, he has no support in the rest of Europe. Indeed, the only party that supports him in Europe, the Czech party, say the document is no constitution anymore. Now, Mr. Speaker, if his party had really changed and moved to the centre, he'd be standing up to his backbenchers, he'd be leading them instead of following them. He'd be standing up to the Eurosceptics instead of appeasing them. He'd be moving to the centre of Europe instead of being left at the margins of Europe.
Speaker, may I add my own expressions of sympathy and condolence to the family and friends of Sergeant Dwayne Barwood. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister once said that he would, and I quote, build a wider pro-European movement in Britain. How does he think he's going to achieve that? By colluding with the anti-European Conservatives to block the in-out referendum that the British people really want?
Mr. Speaker, by not walking out of the House of Commons for a start, by not saying that there is a principle in abstention when it comes to a European issue. And I tell him we will lead the agenda about the future of Europe, we will lead on the environment, we will lead on international development, we will lead on the approach to globalisation, and we will lead on security. There is not much principle, Mr. Speaker, in recommending abstention.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about leadership, but the fact is that he's bottled it. And as far as I can make out, the leader of the Conservatives wants to leave the European Union but hasn't got the guts to say it. Isn't the truth this, that this country will never lead in Europe until politicians who believe in the European Union have the courage to stand up for it, and the politicians who want to leave it are flushed out in an honest debate on our membership?
I agree with him entirely. The Conservative Party leadership is being driven by the Eurosceptics on their backbenches. And I also agree with him that we need to put the pro-European case in the country. But I have to say to him, to go back to the 1970s and relive a referendum in the 1970s is not the way to plan for the future. The way to plan for the future is to have an agenda for a global Europe, which is exactly what this government has.
Currently 6 police investigations underway into the conduct of government in London. The most recent allegations are that the London Mayor's Director for Equalities and Policing has been channeling public funds into organisations run by friends and cronies. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this is completely unacceptable?
Mr. Speaker, as on any occasion where a matter referring to a police investigation is raised, I have to say that this is a matter of the police. It should be fully investigated, but it is not a matter for this House until the police complete their investigation.
The point is, while these accusations are going on, while this investigation is underway, the Mayor, the Labour Mayor, has said he trusts Lee Jasper with his life. And last night he said he is already planning to reappoint him. Doesn't every element of the Prime Minister's moral compass tell him that this is wrong?
Mr. Speaker, as I understand it, the person he's talking about has resigned and is no longer in the employment. And I have to say also, if he wishes to support the police in their investigation, why does his candidate for the Mayor of London say that the first target for cuts is transport and policing? That is the Conservative Party, cutting transport and cutting policing.